How to explain terrorist attacks to children is the topic. So we probably just have about 5 minutes on this, but I am going to welcome Joan to the show. So hang on, please.
King. Oh.
Excuse me. I didn't want to jump in and surprise you, Joan, but I understand that you have what looks like to be pretty important question, and we only have a few minutes left, but would love to hear your question. So tell us what's on your mind.
Okay, yeah. Oh gosh, that was a bit sudden. Yeah, I want to when something bad happens in the world, I want to be able to tell my children and not lie to my children. So say something happens in Christchurch, or someone flies an aeroplane into a building, or there are lots of examples. And I want my children to understand that religion is a part of this, but I don't want them to think badly of people with religion. I want to teach them to be good and tolerant and loving people, but I also really, really want them to understand that part of what is guiding these people is the belief in a religion. And I sent this as an email, but my father grew up during the Second World War, and I remember growing up hating Germans. He grew up in Copenhagen. There were bombardments, and I understand where he was coming from. And I hear I work with refugees, and I hear my Syrian refugees growing up teaching their children to hate Bashar al-Assad. And oh gosh, I don't want to cry. It gets quite emotional for me, because I don't want to teach my children to hate, but I cannot lie to them, and I can't not tell them that religion is a part of this.
Dale, I'd love for you to start. That's such a great question. Thank you, Joan. Just stay on here, and Dale is, I think, would you start, and then we'll go to Wendy.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It's a really important one. I think there are two steps to it. One of them is to put these risks in perspective. The first thing you have to do is be sure that a child is not terrified of the threat for their own safety. They have to understand that terrible things happen in the world, and that the risk to them is they have to understand what it means, that the risk to them is statistically incredibly low. And the reason for that is that when you are terrified, thinking is impossible. You know, it's just we completely withdraw, and then they're not able to make these discernments. So that's the first step. I think the second step is to recognize what the problem is in this. The problem is dogmatic thinking. And the reason that religion is often problematic is because it is often dogmatic. So the thing is that you can help them to recognize that when religion is not dogmatic, it can actually be a positive thing, that the problem is thinking in a particular way, and that when you have beliefs that are non-negotiable and nothing can permeate them, and you feel that other beliefs are inherently evil and must be exterminated, that kind of thinking is the problem. So I think that's the way that kids can really frame it and understand the context for the reason that terrorism happens. It comes out of dogmatic thinking, which is frequently framed in religion, but that you can also have dogmatic thinking that's not framed in it. And we want to raise thinkers who are not dogmatic in their own approach to knowledge.
Yeah, religious extremism is never good for anyone. Wendy, do you have comments for Joan?
What it is in the mind of that person. And so when we talk about any kind of tool or any kind of ideology, you can use that for good or bad. And so these particular people are using their religion and making bad choices for that religion, but a lot of good comes from religion too. And I think that it's just, that's the thing. So is it important to explain right now to your 4-year-old that that religious people attacked a mosque? No, it's not. That's not going to be the most important thing unless they have a context for. You've already laid out the context for. Religion is a tool, and it's only as good or bad in the hands that wield it. And so that's what I would say. I mean, I think that there's a lot of time to discuss, and actually your kids at some point are just going to notice the world around them and know that they're going to take note of the religious aspects of really bad things. It's going to happen. But you can be honest without, without biasing them.
And I'll be very quick with my answer. When I was writing my book, Breaking Their Will, I spent the most time on chapter 3, which is called When Religion is Harmful. And I talk about what makes for a healthy religious environment versus an unhealthy one. And I think that you might find some helpful information in that chapter. But it has to do with religious authoritarianism being pervasive in an individual's environment, and how it leads people to do lots of terrible things, including terrorism and abusing children and other things. So I hope that is helpful. Joan, any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, I just, I'm really, really glad to get your input on this, because it's really been playing on my mind. You know, I navigate a very religious environment daily. So I'm exposed to a lot of really horrific religious dogma every day. And of course, my children hear it. And I really don't want them to grow up hating anyone, really.
Yeah. And so,
not just the terrorists, but I don't. But Dale, you made a really good point of making sure that they feel safe, that they don't think that they're in any danger. I hope they don't think that. But yeah, that's a really good point. And my children are 6 and 12, and she'll be 13 in a couple of days. Yeah, and 11. So they're quite with it, and they know gentle religion, because we're in Denmark. It's all very gentle, but because I'm in such a religious environment, and news hit children, and sometimes the news is older than the children.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes it's not age appropriate news, and I can't shield them from that. Yeah. But I can perhaps guide how they understand it or interpret it. Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if I think some of your kids are at the age that they would get this, and sometimes this is helpful for children to find something to grab onto when they're really trying to understand these very distressing type topics, which is that when people do bad things to other people that are driven by certain ideologies, very often it has to do with where those people came from. And very often, and I've been thinking about sort of this white supremacist movement happening in the U.S. and that kind of thing. And you think about like the lives of those people when they were growing up. Very often they grew up in very difficult circumstances where, as children or young adults, they were quite powerless and abused and were in very oppressive situations. And very often the reaction to that is to want to gain power by acting out. And so I don't know if that might be helpful for your kids to understand that very often when people do bad things, it's because they had something bad done to them when they were children.
Yeah. No, I see your point in that. But
and seeing them kind of as not evil or something.
It happened to me as a child. And I tell my children that, and I want them to understand that good people can come out of, bad situations. So that would kind of counter that. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But they came out despite the bad situations, not because of them.
Yeah.
You got out despite the bad situation.
Yeah.
Not everyone can do that. Yeah, it's tough.